show what a actual HOP overview presentation might look like. And so I'm happy to help you understand that a little bit better and see how one looks. So this first slide that you see here, I always customize the very first slide of the presentation. I try to be creative with the title. This was a presentation I gave, as you can see, to the fund at their annual assembly in Orlando. We were in Disney World, so I, of course, used a Disney ride and said title can be anyone's cup of tea. When I've been on the beach before for various conventions, I might call it title can be a real beach. It totally depends on what you want to do, but I try to have a little bit of fun with it and use this opportunity to show your personality, talk about yourself a little bit, and then you really get right into it. So to begin, I talk about what was our goal of the Homebuyer Outreach Program? When we set out to do this, what were we trying to do? Why did we create this? And, sometimes I ask the audience what their expectations of HOP are. What have they heard about HOP? What do they know about HOP? And I tell an anecdote. I talk about how several years ago, Alta heard from its members all across the industry that they were really hoping for some sort of got milk campaign for the title industry. They didn't understand why we didn't have a nationwide message for our industry and why we weren't sort of shouting it from the rooftops. And then about that same time, that's when the realtors really amped up their television commercials that you see all over the place right now. Everybody knows the commercial with Elizabeth Banks where she's jumping on the couch talking about emperors of escrow. Everybody smiles and knows that story. But unfortunately, that smile turns into a frown because the title industry, we just can't afford television ads like that. We can't afford to be on television in all of those different markets all across the country because that is hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Not even on the creative, just purely buying that time on TV is a lot of money. And we're going after something totally different. With the Homebuyer Outreach Program, we wanted to really focus our efforts. Realtors have to reach out to anyone that might ever buy a home, and that's who they are trying to market to make sure that whenever you're going to buy a home or sell your home, that you use a realtor. That's really important to them. For us, we need to target the 6 million plus people that are going to purchase a home this year. Those are the people that we need to talk to. We don't need to talk to anybody else. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh man, I really need an owner's title insurance policy today. They decide to purchase their home or refinance their home or sell their home, and that's when they need us. And so that's who we need to be talking to. So immediately we wanted to narrow our scope and our focus. Now, as the name suggests, we created the Homebuyer Outreach Program because initially we really were only focused on the homebuyer. We were very focused on the consumer, the customer, and making sure that we had messaging for them. And as we started to go through this, and I'm going to talk more about the research that we did and the research that's available and things like that here in a minute, but as we went through this and we talked with our members, it became very clear to us that it's really our responsibility to educate all stakeholders. It can't just be the consumer. It can't just be the lenders and realtors and builders that we've talked to previously. It can't be just our regulators. It's got to be all of these folks. And that leads me to our research. How did we know this? How are we going to get the industry to buy into this program and to buy into this new way of talking about ourselves? And we knew that in order to do that, we really needed to have some research behind this. And so Alta partnered with a firm, and we set out all across the country to do this consumer research. We met in 10 different focus groups in 5 different cities all around the country. We talked with consumers, realtors, and lenders in each one of those cities. We got to sit behind a glass wall where we could see what people were saying, and our moderator would ask questions like, what do you think about title insurance? What do you know about title insurance? Do you know if you have a title insurance policy? Do you know the difference between owners and lenders? Did your realtor ever talk to you about title insurance? If it was the lender or realtor groups, we would say, how do you talk about title insurance? How do you feel about it? And we heard a lot of different things. One of the biggest things that we heard that I think sort of startled us and helps solidify this idea that we need to talk to all we need to educate all stakeholders, is that a lot of these realtors that have gone to lunch and learns in your office and have been in the industry for 20 or more years, they said, oh yeah, we love our title company. They keep the trains running on time. They keep everything organized. They deal with, the fallout that happens during a deal. They're great. But I always warn my buyer that there's a $25,000 deductible on their owner's policy. And we were just left scratching our heads. These were people that have, like I said, have gone to your lunch and learns, have probably gone to a million different education and outreach events with you over the last 20 years, and yet still don't actually know what we do or the benefits of it and how it's provided to their customer. And that's a problem. And that's not only a problem that they don't understand it, it's a problem that then our consumers don't understand it, that our regulators don't understand it. That's a really big issue. And so we're going to get more into that in a little bit here. But that kind of response during our research was eye-opening to us. Other pieces of our research, we did an online survey of more than 1,000 recent home buyers, meaning that they purchased a home in the last 6 months of the time we took the survey. And we also did phone interviews with regulators around the country. We talked to a few regulators that are really fond of our industry. We talked to a few that aren't very fond of us, and then we talked to some that have bigger fish to fry in the insurance world in their states. So they kind of leave us alone. And we talked to them not to necessarily start any fires or ask any new questions, but we wanted to know, in a perfect world, if most of you think that our industry doesn't do a good job of educating the consumer, in a perfect world, what would that education look like? And for most of those regulators, their answer to us was simply to start, because they really felt like as an industry we weren't doing anything right now to better educate the consumer especially, but even our own business-to-business partners on what we do and the benefits and why it's important. So that's why I stay on this slide so long, and I really talk about the research, and I really talk about why we really believe it's our responsibility to educate all stakeholders. Even if you think that you are doing a great job in your education, as we go through some of this hot messaging, you really need to think through if you're doing the best job that you could be doing at your education, communications, and marketing. So as we went through this, we hired a marketing firm to help us. Most of you have heard of them by now, and their name is 360 Live Media. We hired them to help us develop the ads and to think through the program. We also developed a work group within the Alta world, and that is the HOP work group that is now a full-blown committee. And that work group was made up of agents, underwriters, real estate attorneys, and communication and marketing professionals from around the title insurance industry. And that group worked tirelessly on this program. I don't think I'll ever be able to really explain all the work that went into it, but they met every other week for almost 10 months, going through all of the ads that you'll see, all of the content that you see in the HOP program. They went through all of that, looking at every single word, and we're trying to help us create a universal program, a homebuyer outreach program that could be used all throughout the United States for an industry that is probably one of the least universal out there. And so that's a big piece that you can talk about, is that this is all so customizable and really made for you to work in your own market, because we can't create something that is a perfect gift for each member. The real estate transaction is too complex for that. And so that's why the program is the way that it is, and we let people really do whatever they want. And as we considered developing the program, and we knew that we wanted it to be well-rounded and as universal as possible, we started having a few considerations. And one of those is that we live in this media-saturated world. On the screen now you see Times Square, and there are so many different messages coming at you all at once, whether it's the Motown ad that you see, or a Coca-Cola ad, or the McDonald's sign in the corner. There's a Reese's sign far back in the distance. I mean, there's all this stuff coming at you. And the same is true, not even in Times Square, but in the room where you're going to give these presentations. There's going to be branded notebooks and hotel logos and Starbucks cups and iPads and Microsoft Surfaces and all of this different stuff. And then within those devices, these attendees have tons of messages coming at them all the time. And that's what we're competing against. Around the same time that we were developing the Homebuyer Outreach Program, a study came out that was very popular that talked about the national average attention span for adults in the United States. And when I do this presentation, I typically ask the crowd, how many of you know what the average attention span is? And people will guess, and some will say 3 seconds, some will say 30 seconds, and the answer is 7 seconds. The average attention span in the United States for adults is 7 seconds. And so as we developed TOP and we tried to think about how in the world can we get through to somebody in this media-saturated world, if the whole real estate, when you're explaining the real estate transaction to someone, if you have 7 seconds to give them that overview, how are we ever going to get title insurance to make sense to them? So that was the first big hurdle that we needed to think about when we revamped our language and the way that we talk about ourselves. Another one that came out during this was the national reading average. One of the things that Alta does, as many of you know, is we get to work with the CFPB a lot. And while, I think that some in the industry think that they only provide headaches, they do teach things. And one of the things that they talked to us about at one point was the reading level of the United States is currently at a 7th grade reading level. That's the national average for adults. And that's another one that I typically will ask the audience, how many of you know what the average reading level is? And it's good that it's a 7, it's 7th grade reading level, because then that goes with the 7-second attention span, so it's easier for you as a trainer to remember. But that reading level was important because we thought, well, what's the industry currently at? What are we at right now? What are we doing? What are we putting out in the world? And most of our stuff in the industry, there are all kinds of Google tools that you can encourage attendees to, if you Google reading level calculator or reading level evaluation, they can see for themselves what their stuff clocks in at. But as an industry, we're anywhere from a 14th to an 18th grade reading level. And I always give a caveat that makes sense. Title insurance is a complicated insurance product, and closing and settlement is part of a very complex financial transaction. And so it makes sense that our materials are that high of a reading level. However, for an entry-level conversation as to why someone should choose title insurance, if they're asking about why it's now labeled as optional on their form, if they're asking about why they should pay $2,000 or $500 or whatever it may be for an insurance policy that they'll never use, we can't afford to be at a 14th grade reading level for 7 seconds. That may be some lawyer's dream conversation, but that's not how the average person talks. And so we had to think about that a lot too, and that was a really big piece of what you're going to see and how we thought about the language that we use and that sort of thing. Another piece here that was extremely important, I use this slide a lot, the grass is only greener where you water it. I don't remember right now whose quote that is, but I think about this in just about every aspect of my life because I think that it's true. It's always easier to think that the grass is greener on the other side, that other industries have it better than we do, or that our neighbors have it better than we do, however you want to look at this quote. But the fact is, it only gets better when you put time and effort into it. And, as an industry for a long time, we've talked about how we were misunderstood and nobody really gets what we do, and nobody really has to because they don't care about what we do. And we kind of operate in the shadows, or we are secondary in the transaction. And all of that's true, but that only gets better if we do our jobs to make it better. If each individual company makes sure that the product they're selling is understood by the person purchasing it or benefiting from it. And that's part of this too. There's a lot, depending on where you're doing your presentation, your hot presentation, there are lots of states in the U.S., more than half of the states, are states where the owner's policy is purchased by the seller. It's a seller pays state, or maybe they'll say the owner's policy is included in the contract. Those are all the kind of phrases you might hear. And that one's so hard to get them to understand why HOP is important, because they'll say, well, we don't need to educate the consumer because it's included in the contract here, so we don't have to worry about the business because it's always there. And I get that. I get that on the business sense. I think that makes, I understand what they're saying. However, our regulators think we're crazy when we talk about the industry like that. And if you think about it from an outsider's perspective, from outside of your four walls, if I were purchasing something for you on Amazon and you were going to receive this gift and I didn't have to explain to you what you just received, and no one ever explained to me about what I just purchased for you, would that be okay to us, or would that make us scratch our heads? It's likely that we would be pretty darn confused about this. We would be really, really confused about what just happened. And that's the case when it's a seller pay situation where someone else is paying for the owner's policy, even though, yes, at some point the owner, the person, benefiting from the policy, the beneficiary will receive the title policy and all of that. It's our responsibility to make sure they know that their property rights have just been protected, because eventually they will be the seller. They will be the ones that have to pay for this product. And so it's so important that we try and break that mindset and think about that. And so those were some of the big pieces: the 7-second attention span, 7th grade reading level, making sure that we start as an industry and water our own grass, and think about the really tough mindsets that we've had for a long time in the industry, trying to break through those through staff trainings and new ways of talking about ourselves. All of that was what we wanted to build into HOP. And I know that you're probably thinking we're about 15 minutes probably into this, and we are only on slide 5. And I get that. But that's why this conversation, the two-way conversation and what you're presenting is so important. And you can do this differently however you want. I personally, with the way that I know that people like to learn and be in an audience, I don't like slides that are full of text. I don't like slides that don't tell a story. I don't like slides that speakers plow through and say, oh, well, this is in your printed packet, so you don't have to worry about it. If it's on the screen, you should be talking about it, and if it's not on the screen, you should be able to tell a story about it. And so that's why my presentations are so image heavy, but you can change it up and do whatever you want, just like the HOP program itself. So keep that in mind. So when we get into the actual HOP language and what we've learned and how we talk about ourselves now, one of the biggest lines that we have started to use and that has been extremely successful is protecting your property rights. And this is just the biggest one. Protect your property rights started because as part of this whole research piece that Alta did as we prepped for HOP, one of the things that consumers told us was that the tagline that Alta used previously was a cliche, and that they didn't like cliches. Consumers overwhelmingly told us that they thought cliches were played out and they couldn't take them seriously. So that was one problem. Another problem that we had, and I always joke in my presentations that this is kind of a dagger in the heart to a lot of people, especially in the industry, but another conversation that was had around this time, and a lot of news was coming out, that for a lot of Americans, protecting the American dream doesn't resonate, which is a phrase that a lot of title companies have all over their materials. It was part of Alta's tagline previously. And for a lot of folks, the American dream is not necessarily to own a home. And there, I've done all kinds of reading on this, and for a lot of folks, the American dream these days is to be some form of debt-free, to pay off their student loan debt, their credit card debt, whatever it may be. It's to be debt-free. For others, the act of purchasing a home is kind of a given now. So it's not necessarily that it's part of their American dream because it's not as hard in their minds. It's not as inachievable as it might have been for older generations. And I know that probably doesn't always make sense, given everything that we heard for so long about how millennials weren't buying homes and things like that, but they definitely have started purchasing homes. And so that's just all stuff that you have to keep in mind as you go through this, as to what the background of this story. And like I said, they hated cliches. They really couldn't focus on the American dream the way we were portraying it. And Alta's old tagline was protecting the American dream since 1907. And it didn't really make sense for us because A, consumers told us they didn't care about it. And B, it was about us. So much of what we do is about us and not about our customer. And we don't protect the American dream. Alta doesn't protect the American dream. Our members protect the American dream. What you guys do each and every day, your staff at home, no one knows more about this than you guys. And so we started thinking about it more, and we said, well, we really need a mandate. You know, we really need we need something, a directive, where we can talk to people about what we do in the most succinct way possible. And that's where, finally, through a lot of tinkering, we came up with Protect Your Property Rights. And this works in so many different ways. If you're at an event, and if you're at a PTO or PTA meeting at your kid's school and somebody asks you what you do for a living, you can say, oh, well, when you purchase a home, I help you protect your property rights. And that's a good enough answer for some people. We talk about this in sort of the bite, snack, meal mentality at Alta. Lots of people use the bite, snack, meal approach. But for a lot of people, that's all they want. And this goes back to the 7 seconds. You know, no one's going to want to talk to you about this for hours on end. Unless there's someone else in the title industry and just really loves this stuff. But I protect your property rights is enough for a lot of people. It's much better than what we were hearing previously from our own members, that people would say, well, I work in real estate broadly, or I work in insurance, or I'm an office administrator, or I deal with public records all day. All of these different phrases that didn't actually explain what we do and why we do it, and the benefits of what we do. And that's what Protect Your Property Rights does. You're immediately talking about the protection that we provide. And that's so important. Not only does Protect Your Property Rights help you answer the question of what you do for a living, but it also, like I said, is a directive. It's something that title companies can say, make sure you protect your property rights. You need an owner's insurance policy to protect your property rights. That's so important. And you can go further, and I'll talk more about that soon, but you can go further into what that means. What does protect your property rights mean? But this is huge, and lots of members have taken this and adopted it. Some have changed it in various ways, but this is totally, you know, this is why Alta didn't trademark this new tagline for us. We encourage members to use it. We encourage you to use it often. And we want to know how people are using it. So be sure to send us how this stuff looks and how you're seeing it out there in the marketplace. Another phrase that's been used in the industry for a long time that, you know, as we did all of our research and preparation for the program, something else that came forward immediately was peace of mind. And like I said, that's a phrase that we've used as an industry for a really long time, but it's important to know that we weren't trying to recreate the wheel with HOP. We really were trying to make sure that we were talking about ourselves in the way that was most effective for consumers, realtors, lenders, and regulators. And the fact that peace of mind still works is a big, big deal. And peace of mind helps you get further down into the weeds. It's sort of it leads into your snack in the bite, snack, meal mentality, because if somebody asks what you do for a living and you say, oh, I help you protect your property rights, and then they say, well, what does that mean? You can talk more about how protecting your property rights gives you peace of mind in your real estate transaction. Another phrase that tested very highly and that we still use a lot is reduce your risk. Protecting your property rights means that we've helped reduce your risk in claims that may come forward in the future. And then if you really want to get into the meal, that's where you can start talking about what those claims might be and how things can get ugly for you if you don't have an owner's policy, that kind of stuff you can include. But I help you protect your property rights. I provide you with peace of mind. I reduce your risk. All of those are more about the benefits that you provide and not the work that you do behind the scenes. And that brings me to my next point. And this is one that a lot of people laugh at in the presentations, but it really sticks with them. And that is that cucumbers and title insurance don't mix. I got this from a woman who heard a presentation, talked about title insurance for a really long time, and at the end of it, she raised her hand and she said, I just don't understand why I'm paying the title company to look for cucumbers on my property. And I just scratched my head. I didn't have any idea what she was talking about. I couldn't understand how we just went through all of this, and that was what she got out of the presentation. And then it finally dawned on me that every time we were talking about liens and encumbrances, this poor woman was hearing limes and cucumbers. Now, I always joke that maybe she wanted a margarita or a really nice vodka drink, but while that sounds good, it really doesn't have anything to do with title, and it doesn't really mix. And this is where, if you're giving these presentations, I always talk about, even if you don't use any of the HOP stuff, even if you don't use any of the HOP advertising materials, marketing materials, any of that, you can still use some of these other ideas. You can go back into your office and think about protecting your property rights, reducing your risk, and providing peace of mind. You can think about, does my education and marketing material cut through the clutter and make sense in 7 seconds? Are we under a 14th grade reading level? Are we getting closer to 7th grade? And this cucumbers and title piece is another one of finding one person in your company to be in charge of jargon. In that bite snack meal, in the bite and probably even most of your snack, you don't need to start talking about liens and encumbrances. They want to know about the protection that you provide. And that's part of, as an industry, for over a decade, we've kind of been on the ropes. Every time we've had to explain ourselves as an industry, it's been a defense mechanism. And we have had to talk about liens and cucumbers. We have had to talk about defending our pricing structure and defending the way that we do business. And part of that is because people don't understand what we do, which is a whole other issue. But part of that is just the lack of education that exists for this industry. And what we do as an industry within our four walls is amazing. Each of the folks that are in the audience listening to you speak is there because someone in their company feels like it's a worthwhile education opportunity for their professional development. As an industry, we make sure that within our four walls, the wheels are greased and we have all the oil and gas and everything that we need to go full force and do everything that we need to do on behalf of our customers. And that's a great thing because it means that our people are extremely well trained, it's extremely qualified, excited, and eager industry, and we do such a good job. But the problem with that is that when we get outside of our four walls into the real world with people that are buying our product and thinking about what we sell, we're not talking about it in a way that makes sense to anybody. And an example of this is that, in a lot of stuff in the industry that we were seeing in their marketing materials before HOP, one line that was always in there, if there was a header that said, what is title insurance? Or what does ABC Title Company do? It would have a sentence that said, without a doubt, it would say, ABC Title searches the public record for liens and encumbrances and yada, 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 all of these jargony words, and it talked about everything that ABC Title did. And this goes back to what I was saying before, that this is because we were defending ourselves. We were talking about what do we do that helps explain the cost or the time or whatever it may be. It's all a rationalization. It's not about what we benefit someone else, how they benefit from the work that we do. And that's what we had to do. We had to sort of switch that mentality and really talk about this stuff differently. And as we built these ads and thought about all of this, we talked about the personality as well. And because, advertising and marketing, they use a lot of touchy-feely words, and personality and tone are part of that. But this was really important because, when we did that research at Alta, we were still coming out of the financial crash, financial crisis, whatever you want to call it. Some people would argue that we're still coming out of it. And people certainly had a certain distaste in their mouth for the financial services industry. And that included especially banks and lenders. Anything that we tested that had the word bank or lender in it did not do well. And when I say tested, that means in those focus groups, we would say, how do you feel about certain words and phrases? And when it was tested, it would not score very high because people had such displeasure with those groups previously. That's probably gotten better in the last few years, but for now, that's how they view it. They also were telling us that they didn't feel like there was anybody in the transaction looking out for them. They didn't feel like there was anybody that had their best interest, which surprised us because as an industry, another phrase that we used for a very long time was that we were the independent third party at the closing table. And the problem was we don't take that phrase just far enough. If you're a football fan, we get into the red zone, but we don't cross the goal line. And that's such a hard thing because we were so close and we weren't getting there. And being an independent third party at the closing table, you could be a passive observer at that point. You're not necessarily there looking out for that person. And so now being able to say that you're an independent third party at the closing table to help protect your property rights or reduce your risk in your real estate transaction, that goes so much further as to your role and your benefit and ultimately your value in why you're in these people's lives. And so that's why the personality of what we put out in HOP was trustworthy, practical, and responsible. That's what people want from a title company. That's what they told us. They wanted to know that who they were working with, they could trust. They wanted to know that it was a practical product that would actually protect them and give them the peace of mind, and that you were responsible, that you were the one looking out for them, that you're the one considering their property rights and their role in the transaction. That was really important. Another piece in all this, like I said, was the tone. How do we come across in our marketing? There are so many different tones you can take in marketing, and everybody does something different. Sometimes it's more the scare tactics. Sometimes it's pulling at your emotions and being sad, or a tearjerker. Some of it's humorous, whatever it might be. For us, we knew that we needed to come across as confident, optimistic, and clear. The clear piece goes back to the jargon that I spoke about during the cucumbers saga. We have to eliminate our jargon. We have to be more clear in our tone of what we're doing, especially if we only have 7 seconds to get it across. We also have to be confident. That's part of the making sure that our staff knows. If you get asked the question, what do you do for a living? Are you able to answer that question? It would surprise you how many of your staff might trip over that question, let alone, being able to answer it to a consumer on the phone or to someone asking questions through a third-party home buying site like Redfin. Are they confident enough to really talk about this? And finally, to be optimistic, to not use title insurance as a scare tactic, but to talk about the protection of the property rights, the peace of mind, the reducing the risk. This is a section where I usually touch on claims and why we didn't include claim stories in a lot of the HOP stuff. And by HOP stuff, I mean HOP marketing materials and education materials. And the answer to that is claims are so complicated for the industry. And if you have some claim stories that are localized and make sense in your world, then you should use those. But what we found is that a lot of folks aren't comfortable in the claim space, in the insurance side of what we do. And that overall, this was our opportunity to be on the offense as an industry. This is our opportunity to sort of bang our chest and say, yeah, we protect your property rights. We give you peace of mind. We're the ones that reduce your risk. And we really wanted HOP to have an optimistic feel to it. We didn't want to talk about how if you don't have an owner's title insurance policy, someone can dispute your property rights. Somebody can stake a claim to your property. That's certainly part of it, but we thought that's really what you get into when you get into the meal of this discussion. HOP is really designed to be more of the bite and snack, and so that was why the optimism was such a big, important piece as we went along in all of this. And one of the last bits here about the language that we use. And again, so far, all of this is just language that we use that regardless of whether the attendees in your session are ALTA members or not, they can use this stuff. And you can talk about how much words matter. And this was never more clear to me than when we started considering the difference between benefit and value. It says it here on the screen, 2 words, huge difference. It's so true, and it's still, every time I really think about it, it blows my mind. But as an industry, this goes back to us being on the ropes and being defensive. We talked about our value all the time, and that's because value leads to a conversation on price. If we talk about what's the value of an owner's title insurance policy, that's when typically title companies will start going down the rabbit hole of talking about all the liens and cucumbers they've put in their bushel for you to look through, because that's what makes up the price you have to pay. If you get a title company to talk about the benefit that they provide, that's where you can talk about how you are helping protect this family in the picture, protect their property rights, give them peace of mind, and reduce the risk in their transaction. That you are the trustworthy, practical, and responsible person at the closing table, making sure that they get the keys to what's probably one of the largest investments of their life. Those are big, big deals. And I every time I do a presentation on this, I always challenge folks to think about, if you don't really believe in what we're saying benefit versus value, test your staff. Just ask your staff to talk about the value of title insurance and then ask a separate group about the benefit. And the answer really does, it shocks me. And this has been a hard one for us at ALTA to kind of get over the finish line. We have to sort of redline the word value all over the place because it's so ingrained in what we do. So just like you're going to nominate someone on your staff to be a czar for jargon, you should have someone that's solely thinking about, are we always talking about our benefit? There's a time and a place to talk about your value, and that's probably when you get into the meal, when someone's talking about what they're really paying for. When you're talking to regulators at times, your value may be more important. Their value is definitely a big piece of all of this. But again, not in the bite and the snack. That is really where you need to talk about your benefits. You need to talk about the protection that you provide as a title company. That's absolutely huge. And I can't ever focus on this slide long enough and get people to really buy into it because it's such a hard one, but that's a really, really big part of the HOP program. As part of the HOP program, we developed a lot of these materials thinking about different audiences. We knew that we couldn't come up with a program that was solely focused on one individual stakeholder group. You know, like I said at the very beginning, we have to educate all stakeholders, which means we have to be thinking about each of those audiences. What do our real estate agents really need? What do consumers want to hear from us? What's more important to a real estate attorney versus a builder? You know, how does a lender think about this? What can they utilize? And that's why we have all these different audiences and messaging points available on the website that you can think through. But, you know, one of the audiences for us was also the ALTA membership. It was you and your staff back at home. That's an important audience in this because you have to start with your staff first to be able to think about what you're doing as an organization and how you're marketing and educating consumers. And if your whole staff isn't able to do it, then that's a problem. And so you really have to start there. And so we do talk about the audience a lot, and HOP is going to continue to segment our audiences as we move forward. You know, you can mention to folks that beginning in October of 2017, HOP is going to have new ads that come out. that are further segmented. So there will be ads that are specifically for realtors. There will be an ad specifically for your regulators. Those kinds of ads will be in place. And it's important to always think about your audience. One message does not fit all. That trucker hat that you bought on vacation might be great, but that doesn't work when you're thinking about your marketing and communication. So that's why considering your audience is so important. And you can, as a hop leader, you can choose to go more in depth in some of this if that's what suits your fancy. If you're really excited about the audiences sheet that you have and want to go through that more, you can. It's just not one that I typically spend a lot of time on. Mostly because people want you to get to this section. This is really the biggest piece of hop. I've labeled it as 70 ways to stop avoiding the question. And I ask the audience, what is the question? And the question is, what is title insurance? And this is 70 different ways to be able to actually answer that, to talk about what title insurance is and how it benefits the home buyer. And so there are all kinds of things that we could have included in this, but one of the big ones was flyers and one-pagers and ads. That's kind of what you'll see throughout this the most. And through the presentation, you can pick and choose what you want to include. You can try and decide, what's most important to you. But the way that I changed it for 2017 was to talk about them in sort of categories and then give examples of some of the pieces. And so that's what you're going to see here. But there are 70 different products within the Homebuyer Outreach Program that people can use, from the ads to the social media posts to the animated ads that you can use online. There are 70 pieces that are available. And so to start out, you've got obviously the blogs, and then we have marketing flyers, and then we have rack cards. And the blogs are really just what it says. They're the longer, wordier content. So if you can't get to the mindset of cutting down your information and really being a 7-second team player, the blog may be for you. And right now there's 7 of those, and you don't have to use them all at once. They're pretty long blog posts. A couple of them are like 4 pages long. And you can think about how to use those differently and cut them up and use them multiple times throughout the year. I always give people sort of a pause during this section to say, don't let anything that we're talking about as far as the hop products go give you pause, because for some people, it's kind of, I tend to talk about it like a sci-fi film where, these glass walls come up in front of you. And so when I say the word blog, I can immediately see some people in the audience cross their arms and, they're kind of like, well, I don't have a blog, so Wayne's not talking to me anymore. We don't do that. This stuff isn't for us. We can't use hop. That's not the case. Some people will come up to me afterwards and say, well, we don't have a blog, but we do have our president or our CEO sends out an e-newsletter every other month, or once a quarter we send out a newsletter to our realtors, or whatever it may be. Could we use the blogs in that setting? And the answer is yes. You can cut up the blogs and turn them into tweets and Facebook posts and other things like that. So don't, we put them into these categories to organize it and try to make it easier for people to find content, but you can cut them up and use it any way that you want. Another piece of the HOP program are the marketing flyers, and I'm going to show a couple examples of those here in a second. But those are one-page flyers that are made to be really easy, quick ways to talk about the industry and what we do. A couple of them are more list-focused. A couple of them are realtor-specific. And they're some of the more popular pieces that we have. And then you have the rack cards. And the rack cards are 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper cut in half. So gone are the days of having full-blown pamphlets with tons of space for lots of words. If you've got 7 seconds, no one has time to read your whole pamphlet full of words. And so the rack cards literally limit the amount of real estate that you have to put content on, but they help you tell your message in a very quick and succinct way. And I'll show you one of those here in a moment too. The realtors so far have really liked the rack cards. They liked them so much that we actually just introduced door hangers made out of the rack cards on altaprints.com. So people, especially in for sale by owner areas, like the door hangers, but realtors also liked them so that they could provide those when needed in their markets. And so those are available for sale at altaprints.com. But overall, the rack cards have just been extremely successful and popular. So this is one of the rack cards, and I sort of sliced it up and moved it side by side here, but normally the 10 steps to buy your home with confidence would be right on top of the numbered section, but I wanted it to show up better on the PowerPoint. And you can talk about how this was one of the really hard pieces of putting together HOP. Again, going back to trying to make a universal program for a non-universal industry, this 10 steps really throws people sometimes. When you're giving your presentation, this may be where you get some hecklers. Hecklers? You may get some hecklers. I'm throwing in extra vowels today. So, you know, some people will say, well, if there are only 10 steps to buy your home, is owner's title insurance or title insurance in general, are we really 4 or 5 of those steps? Maybe not. But most marketing and education is an exercise in vanity, and because we're putting this stuff out there, we get to be a little more vain. We get to explain ourselves the way we want to explain ourselves. We get to be on the offense. We get to be optimistic. We get to be clear and concise, and that's part of this. Some people will ask, well, in number 3, why didn't you say use a realtor or use a real estate agent to find your home? There are some states in the country, like California, where you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to encourage them to utilize a realtor or a real estate agent. So we had to be creative in how we worded this. If you live in a different state or jurisdiction and you want to put something very specific there that is RESPA compliant, you might be able to do that. I mean, it's a business decision for you on some of this. You might want to work in your own, you know, number 6 might be get title insurance with Stanley Title Company. Whatever it might be, you know, you can update all of this to be whatever you want. But this was born out of, there used to be a document that the industry passed around that I think was created by Alta that was 156 steps to buy your home. And it was just crazy. It was an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, front and back, with all words and 156 steps to purchase your home. That's not just a meal, that's a feast. You know, that is going so far in the weeds that if you were a first-time home buyer contemplating purchasing a home, that would just overwhelm you to no end. And so you have to think about that and what you're putting out there. And so that's why our work group, they really went over this stuff with a fine-tooth comb. This is what we rolled out with. But again, if you don't like those 10 steps, you can create your own 10 steps. I just would strongly encourage you to never create 15 steps or 20 steps or get crazy with adding steps to this. I think it's important to keep your list to either 7 or 10. Those are good marketing list numbers. So, oops, I skipped ahead here. There's a a marketing flyer that is called What Every Realtor Should Know About Owner's Title Insurance. And the realtors love this because it specifically mentions them. Like I said before, everything is about the vanity. This is from a title company in Indiana, specifically, that put 2 of their closers that do lots of realtor outreach on the front of this flyer. There's more of the flyer below where these women are pictured, but this is just sort of the flyer cut in half to show you guys. But this was really different for this particular company to put out there because they didn't really give their closers a face before. And I think they used like a college photographer or something, and it was maybe like $50 or something like that. But you know, this kind of personalization is something that you definitely should deal with this flyer to make it really useful in your market. And this is just an example of another marketing flyer we have. It's the 7 reasons why every home buyer needs owner's title insurance. As you can see, this one's cut in half again, but I just wanted to show you part of the list. There's 7 different reasons. You can, again, cut those up to be Facebook posts, to be Twitter posts, to be maybe themes of your education each quarter for 7 different quarters. Maybe you change up your email signature lines to include this stuff, whatever it might be. you can chop this up and do whatever you'd like. Maybe this is your webinar series or your blog series. And this just shows how one title company in Wyoming swapped out the Alta logo to put their own on here. And they reworded some of the lists too, so that it made more sense in Wyoming versus, Indiana or something like that. So then we also have within the program, we have print ads that are, again, you shouldn't think about necessarily putting them in a magazine, but think of them for email marketing, for handouts, for posters in your training rooms, whatever that may be. The print ads are good for that. We also have 3 PowerPoints that are available. There's one for staff training, so that if you want to go back after this presentation and train your own staff and kind of get some of this hop stuff out of your own head, that's what you can use that particular presentation for. There's also one that is specifically for realtors. It kind of goes through that 10 steps document and explains what's going to go into the home buying process and what role your closing and settlement company plays in that. And then the last one is one that's it's really great for first-time homebuyer events. You get invited to one of those seminars. It's really brief, really clean, and really easy, and it talks about what is title. It's kind of a vocabulary lesson of what to expect of what is title insurance, what's the difference between owners and lenders insurance, those policies, those types of things. It's a really great presentation for those kind of seminars if you've not gone before. And then, I already showed you the realtor flyer, but there are other realtor resources that are exclusive to realtors for free that are in this. That website that you want to give people, they can access it at alta.org/homebuyer, which is on the screen here, but they can also access it, a realtor can utilize it, whether they're an Alta member or not, at alta.org/realtor. alta.org/realtor. So within that, there's the PowerPoint, there's the marketing flyer, there's a rack card that's specifically for realtors, and then later in 2017, there's going to be more extremely realtor-specific ads that we put in there as well that companies can utilize. That's really important for us. Next year is going to be a big year where we focus on realtor resources and partnerships so that they better understand what title insurance is. So this is one of those print ads. This is what we lovingly call the blueprint ad. And it may be hard for your attendees to see in the back, but I always read the main tagline to them, which is, your life will change over time, your peace of mind never will. And the photos walk through the timeline of your life in a house, from when you move in to when you get the dog to when the baby is born to whatever it may be. And this goes to that's your bite. Your life will change over time, your peace of mind never will. What does that really mean? That means that title insurance is a one-time fee that you pay at closing that reduces your risk and protects you for as long as you own your house. That's what this ad is meant to really get to, and the way that you can talk about this. Another ad that people love within this section is whatever you call home. Sometimes we call it our artistic piece, but our Warhol piece, rather. This one had a lot of conversation when we developed it, because there's usually some sort of line in the sand, whether it's age or whatever, on whether people like it or not. But the reason that we included this is it's our most simple message in the whole program. Whatever you call home, make sure you protect it with owner's title insurance. Obviously, this tests best with millennials. They really like this ad, but this ad looks nothing like any other ad that we do as an industry. This ad grabs your attention. If you saw this, some of our members have made this ad into a billboard campaign in their markets. If you saw this ad driving down the street, you would definitely look up at it. Some of our members have used this ad in their local movie theaters, in the advertisements that play before all of the previews come on. And if you think about this ad coming at you in a dark movie theater, that would be pretty powerful. And you can change out the homes if you want to add more that look like houses in your area. If you're from a more metro area and you need to add more brownstones or townhomes, you can definitely do that, or more condos or commercial properties even, whatever you call home for your business. I mean, you can really change it up however you want. Our most popular ad that we have right now is called the force field ad. This ad it says, think of it as a property rights force field. and it has all of those things that can come at us, like legal fees and liens and foreclosure. I like this one, even though we don't necessarily talk about liens because of the jargon. Liens looks like aliens to me when it's flying into the force field, which I really like. And I didn't really get the popularity of this ad at first, but the way that I kind of rationalize it when I do presentations is that with the world that we live in, you know, Marvel movies come out every other month and make billions of dollars worldwide every year. And so just with the way people, you know, sort of the sentiment of the country right now, and people sort of galvanize around this idea, I think that's why they like this. This is an animated ad that people can utilize where the greenhouse kind of grows out of the ground and then the bubble goes over the top of it and all those words fly into it and then hit the floor. That's a big popular animated ad that we have in the program that matches this ad. And again, you can cut it up, make it your signature line for a little while. Or, you know, some people have customized it to include a commercial building there in the center instead of a residential home. You can do whatever you'd like. And then I've talked about this a little bit previously, but there's obviously social content and digital ads that are available in this as well. We've got actual tweets that are sized for Twitter, meaning they're under 140 characters. We've got things that you can post on Facebook that include images that are sized correctly and will be appropriate for Facebook. The digital ads that I've talked about, those are all animated that you can utilize. You know, maybe you're going to put an ad up on your local realtor site or on your the builder that you work with the most. Maybe you'll put it on there. Maybe you'll consider putting it on realtor.com. You know, whatever that may be, you can consider that with those digital ads. And then finally, HOP offers resources in the program as well. And these are, like this says, these are templates and various education, how-tos on how to use the HOP materials. But within that is also, you know, one of the things we heard from some of our smaller members, the folks that don't have full marketing departments or budgets for outside consultants and that sort of thing, is that they like the HOP stuff, but it doesn't match anything else they have. They don't have the money to kind of update their letterhead or the regular PowerPoints that they have to give. Those aren't updated. And so there are blank templates for letterhead and PowerPoints and Word documents that just have a slightly updated look, that look like there's something from this decade that you can still totally customize and add your own logo and all of that, but don't necessarily look like they're from several years ago. They're a little more updated so they can match the rest of the HOP stuff that you might be using. So we're getting close on time here, but part of that's because I've tried to explain the back end of this. But so another piece that we have within the HOP program is our HOP Spanish language suite. We translated 5 of the HOP materials into Spanish for our members to reach out to different segments of their market, and people have been really receptive to this stuff. And, you know, sometimes when we talk about translated materials, people only will talk about this if they're in a border state. There are Spanish-speaking communities in every single state in the country, and it's important to highlight this because you never know when this would be useful to a title agent in your market. And oftentimes you'll get asked if we have plans for more languages and things, and that's not the case right now, but I always encourage people to have the stuff translated on their own if they would like. You know, that's totally up to them. You know, if they have a large French-speaking population in their area, then they should definitely translate it into French. That's usually not a terrible price to incur on these products. Another really popular document that we have in the program is called Our Industry Explained. This is a tool that you can use when you're training staff, new and old, like the screen says, because it kind of walks through 2 mock conversations that we have. One is when you're at a networking event, or again, if you're at the talent show at your kid's school or whatever, and someone's trying to understand what industry you work for, it kind of walks through that conversation in the bite snack meal approach. And then the other side is explaining to someone when they're in your office for a closing or for settlement, what you do, why you're there, the role that you play and the benefit that you provide. That's a really, really great piece that you can utilize and either print out for your staff or order it on Alta Prints or whatever it may be. People really, really like that. And all of this stuff, you probably can't say it enough as you give the presentation. It's all available at alta.org/homebuyer. You just log in with your Alta information and you're able to get all of this. And then I've mentioned it several times. Sometimes at the very beginning of the presentation, I'll ask the audience if they've heard of Alta Prints, if they've heard of HOP, just to kind of gauge what I need to focus my time on as we go. But hopefully all of you as HOP leaders have gone through altaprints.com. Our kind of tagline for it is that you can customize, print, download, and it's so easy. And that's truly the case. If you've got time and you really love Alta Prints and you want to do kind of a live demo, I strongly encourage that. I think that's really smart. It really gets people excited about it. Again, you use your Alta ID to log in to Alta Prints, and then all of the printed materials are there, and you can customize them and download a digital PDF for free. That's probably a little redundant, a digital PDF. You can download a PDF for free, and if you think that you can get better prices at your local printer, you're more than welcome to take that to them and have it printed. Or you can use that PDF, again, for your email marketing, for your blog, social media, whatever it may be. But then, we've also contracted, Alta has a really great printer that we work with, and we've contracted with them for discounted print pricing, and they'll send this stuff to your next sales event or your next training or your next homebuyer seminar or whatever it may be. They'll do that. A couple of really unique things that are on altaprints.com that you might want to point out. Lots of people want those print ads available in poster size. And so you can print foam board posters on the site. People put those in their conference rooms, in their training rooms. They'll take it to first-time homebuyer events that they're doing. That's how they use those. Those are a very popular item on the site. Some underwriters have given them away as gifts to their agents in the past. I mean, people are being very creative in how they use those posters. And then a couple of other things that are on there that are of interest. I mentioned the door hangers before. Those are very popular, but then also there's a new training guide that's on there. So there's a worksheet that we offer. So if you're going to do a staff training on HOP and you want to kind of quiz them at the end, there's a worksheet that is a dry erase format that you can purchase so that you can do these trainings all the time and you're not really wasting paper. You can just purchase some of them in dry erase form and go from there. And that's people really like that as well. And I'm sure there's more stuff that will get added to Alta Prints over time, so just keep checking it out. Keep listening to your HOP Leader quarterly webinars, and you'll get all of that. But that is the bulk of Alta Prints right there. And then again, I always give them the alta.org/homebuyer website. I tell them that there are so many ideas on there that the Alta staff can help with their ideas, that they should reach out to you as a HOP leader for what you're seeing in the industry and how you've used some of this in the past. Between alta.org and /homebuyer and alta.org/realtor, all those 70 different pieces are available, and we really encourage members to use them. As you get to the end of the presentation in 2017, again in October, at Alta One, we're going to roll out a number of additional HOP materials. So new ads, new flyers and rack cards, and all of that's going to get added to the system. So if you are doing the presentation with people that are familiar with HOP and have used some of the pieces before, you can let them know that new ads are coming very soon, and that this was an investment for Alta. Alta is committed to the homebuyer outreach program and making sure that it's continually fresh and updated for our members. And the way that I've kind of described it for people at the end of these presentations is that we're kind of taking the Apple approach. So if you're familiar with, iPhones and how Apple works with those rollouts, some years you're going to get a brand new iPhone 8. And that's what many expect in the fall of 2017 is a new iPhone 8. And that means you get all new bells and whistles and new designs, and it's really, hopefully spectacular, but otherwise, other years you're going to get an iPhone 8S, and that means that you're not going to get a full-blown update. And that was the case in 2017. The update was that we released altaprints.com, and we had, or I'm sorry, that was the case in 2016. We released altaprints.com, and we had our Spanish language suite. So there weren't necessarily new ads or new ideas and something big, bright, and flashy, but we did have updates that year, and it was a really important year for people, and that's definitely going to be the case next year as well. But for 2017, it's definitely an iPhone 8 kind of year. There's going to be a lot of exciting stuff to talk about when we get to Alta 1 in Miami, so make sure that you plug that as well when you get to the end of these presentations. And then I typically leave time for questions. You know, I think hopefully, as you can tell, as I've presented this to you all here, I'm a pretty casual and informal speaker. I try to be as much in the dialogue with people as I can. You know, if I'm talking about different pieces of hop and I can see people in the audience start to talk to their neighbor and not really believe in what I'm saying, I'll ask them, tell me about it. What are you talking about right now? What don't you agree with? What can we talk about as an industry here? And really get into it, you know, not into it in terms of an argument, but into it in terms of why do they think that way, and why do they think that what we're doing is not correct, or how might they change it, or how can we change it in the future? All of that is really good dialogue to have, and you can't really go wrong if you kind of include that as you go. If you're more formal and you kind of need to give the presentation and then have questions at the end, that's another way that you can use that sparkler slide, is to give that time for people to ask questions and to talk about ideas and all of that. That's totally up to you. Another thing you can do during that section that I've done, depending on the size of the group, and many of you have gone through this at the Hop Leader trainings and in other Alta meetings, you can change this slide to be a photo of lightning and do a lightning round. And there are rules to the lightning round. Don't forget, the lightning round means that everyone goes around the room and gives sort of their aha moment or their biggest takeaway or their biggest piece of homework they got out of the event. So out of your presentation, you know, what did they get out of it? And it's really great because you get to hear, what do people really coalesce around? What maybe fell flat this time? What can you do better next time? All of that comes out of a lightning round. And the rules for a lightning round are, there are no skips. So even if somebody passes in the moment because they can't think of anything, you have to come back to them. And there are no repeats. And depending on the size of your crowd, you know, I change up the lightning round all the time. And so if it's a really big crowd, I don't talk about the repeats rule. I let people repeat. If it's a really big crowd, maybe I'll also just ask people in general for their aha moment. I won't actually go around the room. But if it's smaller than 100 people, I might go around the room just to say, what did you learn from this? Because it also keeps them on their toes as an attendee. You know, they're there to learn, and they need to be thinking about how to take this back to their office. And so it forces them to kind of evaluate the last 60 or 75 or 90 minutes of what you've been talking about and go further with them and think about that a little bit more. So that's why all this exists, and we are a little over an hour into it now, and I really appreciate your time. And I know that this was an important piece for you so that you can kind of see how a general HOP presentation is done. Again, this is my way of doing it. This is not necessarily Alta's prescribed way. You should definitely make it your own. You shouldn't try to feel like you're stepping into someone else's shoes to give these presentations. But in general, you kind of get the idea of the content you need to provide. You need to talk about how we developed HOP, how we came to this. You need to talk about the research that we did. You need to talk about the major language pieces of HOP and what we're trying to do between peace of mind, reducing your risk, protecting your property rights, benefit versus value, jargon, all that kind of stuff. Liens and cucumbers, that's the kind of content you definitely want to include. And then depending on your style and timing, you can really play around with the actual HOP pieces and how you highlight those however you want. Those are the big ones. And then, like I said, Alta Prints is such a big Alta member tool that as a HOP leader, that's an important one to cover at the very end too. But the rest, you know, there's so much in your HOP leader portal that you can utilize. And on, again, alta.org/homebuyer, you can make this whatever you want. And I encourage you to do so, and make sure that you talk to the Alta staff in the future about what you're doing and all of that. We're going to try and work on ways that we can crowdsource more of what we do as hop leaders, but this is a big one, and just doing your first hop overview for 60 minutes is not easy, and you might feel uncomfortable with it, especially if you feel like you're not as familiar with hop, but you're going to do great, and we really appreciate you being a hop leader, and I really appreciate your time today. So thanks, everybody. Good luck with your trainings. Bye-bye.